Hi, Brett Taylor here. I have the privilege to introduce to you today Neale Smith. A quick bio on Neale. Neale is an athlete to start with. He's had national success in track and field for both high jump and long jump, played rugby, and of course had a playing career as a golf professional for 10 years as well. The highlight of, I believe, his career in 1992, winning the PGA Tour Q School Finals, which of course put him on the 1993 PGA Tour. He's also had several wins as a professional, one of those being on the Canadian Tour, where the Canadian Tour is where I had met Neale as well. He's played several tours, obviously including the PGA Tour, Australasian PGA, the Canadian Tour, Asian Tour, and many tours as well. Neale is now a mental performance coach for a stable of PGA Tour players, and Googling his name, you'll certainly see who some of those players are and the credit that Neale has been given with those particular players. So have a look for that. I am grateful today to have the opportunity to speak with you, Neale. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, no problem, Matt.
So I have quite a list of topics, and we kind of had a little chat earlier. One of the things that a lot of players are looking for information on is staying in the present, and I know you've mentioned that you have a process for staying in the moment and the process of keeping one shot at a time. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, you read a lot in the sports psych literature, how important it is to play one shot at a time. And I totally agree, but I also think you need to understand or have a system to do that. Because if you break golf into its simplest form, there's, for example, shot number one, there's a preparation for the shot, there's the review of the shot, and then there's a break before the next shot. So if you were to ask yourself consistently the question, what do I need to do right now? You'll be somewhere in those particular places. It's either preparing for the shot, over the ball doing the shot, reviewing the shot, or walking and waiting between shots. One of the philosophies that I try to instill in my players is it's really the shot at hand that is the most critical thing, and that ability to maintain present focus through the day is a skill that you get to work on every day. Now, it's challenging because of golf and Western culture, valuing the result so much. There's lots of things pulling us away to future or past, and the typical things go along the lines of, if the day is going well, the player typically gets too involved in future implications of playing well, especially outcome implications. And, if it's not going so well, they're too worried about what happened and then the future implications of playing poorly. When really their job is to either prepare for the shot, hit the shot, review the shot, or walk well between shots. So part of it is defining what good process is, and then that making your first criteria for reviewing the day is how well you did maintain that present process focus, as well as the score is obviously going to give you an indicator of how the day went. But one of the things I'm really into is promoting a criteria for success that's not based on the outcome of the day.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So, and it's good. I think what I think I'm hearing is, if you have a defined process for preparing for a shot and going through the shot and reviewing the shot after the fact, that will sort of keep you focused on the present moment and on those factors that you need to consider as you're going through that process. And that, if it's defined well enough, it will, in a sense, prevent you from getting distracted by the future.
Well, it'll help you.
It'll help you, okay.
Yeah. No, look, a lot of my stuff, I don't believe if you do A, you're going to get B every time.
Right, yeah.
Always I say to my guys is that you're giving yourself the best chance to.
Yeah.
And obviously people get distracted, and to me it's not whether you get distracted, it's how quickly you refocus. But I definitely think that if you can define what you can control and what you can't, what's your controllable process, is then you've got a way to review the day other than fairways, greens, number of putts, score. They're all valuable tools in terms of the feedback you're getting from your game, but again, to me, it's like the stats are only helpful if you've got good mental process on each shot. Like, for example, if you're not quite committed to your plan, you're uncomfortable about the shot, you're not committed to your plan, you feel pretty tight and swing and make a mistake, the feedback you get from that shot is that you were tight and didn't swing freely. You're not actually getting real good feedback on your swing or your game from that particular shot.
Right. Okay.
Because one of the things is, one of the values of having good process on each shot is that you're going to get untainted feedback about what you're working on.
Right. No, that's true.
Which I think is important for the improvement process moving forward. To say there's a shot that you're really well into mentally, it's going well, you're into the shot correctly, but you make the same mistake over and over again for a month.
Yeah.
There's some good feedback that there's something in your technique that you need to improve there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Because half the guys don't know if it's a technical error or a mental error.
That's true.
Part of the value of developing good process is that it gives you the best chance to hit the shot that you've planned, but also gives you immediate, gives you real feedback on where your game's at.
Yeah.
Which then you can start to take the steps in terms of instruction or practice to fill the gaps in your game and go from there.
Yeah. So is there any strategies per se that can prevent a player from thinking ahead? It's always easy to say one shot at a time, but obviously when players are playing really well, that can be a little bit more difficult, and you tend to sometimes think ahead. Is there anything in particular that would stand out or make that easier?
Yeah, because I find the in-between shot period one of the most challenging for guys when it's playing well. Because they can usually direct focus appropriately around the ball, but it's the in-between shot where they really start to get ahead of themselves and into the implications of playing well.
Right.
And so there's actually several strategies that can work there. One is just the listening strategy, so walking for 100 yards or so and just observing what you listen to. One's a visual strategy of just trying to find 5 or 10 things that catch your eye. One is being verbal, talking to caddy, other player on the tour, or walking scorer. There's several strategies to help you stay present. Because regularly, like say for example in the listening exercise, I have a player walk for 50 or 80 yards and ask them to observe what they listen to, and at the end of that 80 yards, I'll ask them, okay, what did you hear? And they'll list off, I heard some clubs rattling, I heard a bird over here, I heard a car over there, so whatever it is that they listen to or observe. And then I'll ask them, well, did you think about your score? And they typically say no. Did you think about your swing? And they typically say no. And I ask them, well, how was that experience for you? And they said, well, actually it was quite nice and actually pretty relaxing.
Yeah.
Which obviously is the goal in between shot, is to have the easiest walk you can between shots and get into a somewhat neutral place mentally and emotionally for the next shot.
Yeah. Okay. So, another topic is, maintaining your attention over the ball. And, I've been asked as well, how do you play without swing thoughts and focus just on the target? When you're in that, final moment, that's, you want to, I think a lot of players play best when they focus on the target in the last moments. And How do you keep that attention over the ball?
Well, I would say I teach attention a little bit differently to most in that I actually give the players 5 categories of attention that's typically going to work. Because I actually have several players that don't like target focus at all.
Okay.
And they actually get quite distracted the more visual and target focused they are. So, because, and this has evolved for me over my years of playing and working with guys in that, like say a guy had a day where they really played well and hit the ball well, I'll ask them, well, what did you focus on over the ball? Where was your attention? And to me, it always would fall into one of 5 categories. So one was target, one was body cues, one was club cues, one was rhythm cues, and one was nothing.
Okay.
So I think through investigation and a little bit of experimenting, you'll tend to find with each player what's more likely to be their dominant, preferred attentional style. Because I had a guy almost win a tournament on tour a couple of years ago that was barely glimpsing at the target.
Okay.
You know, and just to make sure that his alignment was in the ballpark. And the more he focused on how his right elbow moved, the better he hit the ball and got himself into contention. So whereas I've had other players that don't like that at all, and they want their focus only visual and in front of the ball. So I think it's a little simplistic in a lot of the sports psych literature that you have to do it like this. So I think I prefer to give the players options and can either assist them if I'm working with them or on their own. They can start to figure out what's the best attentional style, because at conscious mind level, you're going to direct your attention like a laser beam, and you can direct it anywhere. So you can direct it to target, you can direct it to how your pelvis is moving. It can go anywhere. So the goal is to have that attention fully locked onto the thing that you've pre-decided that you're going to focus on. And I find, that gives you the best chance to hit the shot that you've planned well, because you've decided this is your best cue, but also there's less space in your conscious mind for the typical bad things that jump in, especially late in a routine, which is, don't go here, don't go there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the better your mind's fully focused on something, the less space there is for other stuff to jump in.
Yeah, agreed. And, speaking of focus and attention and concentration, is there anything that you can comment on with respect to, a player starts the round, maybe things aren't going the way they would like, putts aren't dropping, and maybe a player starts questioning, how the day is going. Is there a way to refocus mid-round to sort of bring that confidence back?
Well, I think you've got to be honest with yourself about where your process is at. Like, say, for example, in putting. Say you've hit, you've had reasonable shots into the first 6 greens, you've had some good looks but haven't made one. That's typically frustrating for a touring pro, right? But if you're honest with yourself, and if you ask the player, did you read the green accurately? Were you committed to your read? Did you build some nice connection to your stroke? Did you feel well aligned? And did you make a nice stroke down your line? If they've done that, they've done their job. It's just somehow the ball didn't go in.
Right.
So,
okay.
If there's something in their process or their execution that's not right, then that golf gives you time to make some small adjustments. But if your process is good, it's either a green reading issue or you just haven't had the luck on the greens.
Yeah.
Because I'm convinced to have success in tournament golf, you've got to have good process, you've got to have good execution, and you've got to have good luck.
Okay.
And luck's a part of the game. That on the greens, it's not a perfect surface, and you've got to get the right roll and have the putt lip in as opposed to lip out.
Yeah.
But if we can define what good process is, that's one of the first things, and then you're working in your practice to grow your execution skills. And then luck's all about where you are on the karma tree.
Okay. So, with respect to you'd mentioned pre-shot preparation before, and I think you kind of have a different way about pre-shot routine. What are your thoughts on that?
I really prefer for my clients to have two routines. One for when they're comfortable and one for when they're not. I think every pre-shot routine has 5 steps or 5 phases that has to be followed. But I find that when the player is comfortable with the shot, the first 3 phases almost happen instantaneously. And on those routines, when the player is comfortable, they don't need any physiology control because they're not that anxious. There's not a lot of directed conscious thought, and it's a lot more flowing and easier routine. So I think when the player is uncomfortable, they need to work a little bit harder on their physiology control, because if they are fearful about the shot, already there's a chemical dump going on and they're starting to get some anxiety response to that.
Yeah.
They need to work harder on their breathing, maybe some progressive relaxation, pace of their walk. They need to work a lot harder with their conscious mind and their self-talk. And they might need a pretty conservative plan in that situation. So, because I think each routine, every shot starts with collection of information, then there's a creation of plan, then there's a connection to the plan, then there's the aiming, then there's the doing. So no matter what shot you pick, it follows that sequence. But say, for example, in chipping, you've had chips where you've got to the ball and you immediately know what to do. You've got the flight, you know how the ball's going to react, you know what club to hit. The phases 1, 2, and 3 happened almost instantaneously. So you basically should just grab the club, get in and go. You're likely to hit a good shot.
Yeah.
Now, and you've also had circumstances where you come to some chip shots, it takes you 20 seconds to read the lie, let alone come up with a plan.
Yeah.
So that's where you've got to work a little bit harder, and it's a lot more conscious and directed on what you want to do given that set of circumstances, plus a little bit of physiology control.
So do you find players are pretty comfortable with that too? I mean, I think a lot of people believe that the pre-shot routine has a certain amount of comfort in it because it's a consistent sequence, but you're sort of taking a different tack there with if your collection and your plan and your connection to the shot is understood before you or as you're arriving at the ball, then just jump in and hit it. Is that players are comfortable and able to do that, I guess, because they feel comfortable and confident in the shot that they've chosen. Is that the case?
Yeah, and it's not so much jumping in and hitting it, but it's like once each phase of the routine's got a purpose. So, for example, in green reading, I really recommend with the guys that once you have that sense in the green reading that you've got it, that you've got the line, you should stop the green reading.
Right.
A lot of guys keep doing the loop, and they come back and they actually see more, that actually gets them more doubting than they were a few seconds ago.
Right.
So, look, most players that I've explained this to have all come from the philosophy that you need to do the routine the same every time. And I would say almost to every player, bar a few exceptions, they've enjoyed the concept of having 2 routines. It gives them more freedom. And the reason that this has evolved for me is that I've seen players that have had similar pre-shot routines in terms of how it times, how it looks, the number of waggles, where it was a highly structured routine that timed the same every time, but they were poorly aimed, looked tight, and hit poor shots.
Right.
So, like, the routine was the same, but it wasn't functional, it wasn't producing good results. So the whole purpose of that pre-shot preparation is to help you hit the shot that you've planned successfully. So not just to make it look the same.
Right.
So each part of that phase of the routine needs to be purposeful and do something for you.
Yeah, agreed.
Because it's like the whole connection to the shot. Sometimes immediately the connection's there. You don't need a rehearsal. Some players like to do a rehearsal. Some like to do a mini rehearsal. Some like to do a full speed rehearsal. I give the freedom to the players to, look, if you've got the connection and you just want to go, go. If you want to make a mini swing or 2, take them. It's like it's not so much about the number or the structure. If you take an extra lag or an extra look, it doesn't matter to me. As long as it's functional in terms of, because every time you hit the ball responds to how the club hits it. Right? So There's a set of impact conditions of how the club hits the ball and makes the ball fly the way it's going to fly. And that whole pre-shot preparation should be based around I'm trying to make a certain movement to make my club deliver at a certain time to make the ball fly the way I want it to fly.
Yeah.
So each part of that phase of the routine needs to be purposeful.
Right. Well, and I think it's fair to say the physical routine doesn't generate confidence or any mental strength per se. But if you go through, as you said, with these cues with collection, plan, connection, aim, and doing. I mean, if you are confident when you get to the ball, well, that is a lot more important, obviously, than the physical process you'll go through to hit the ball. And reversing that, the physical process itself isn't going to give you that confidence.
Right, and the thing is, say you get over the ball and you don't feel confident, either your plan, because planning I think has an important emotional component. You have to believe the plan, and I find this more with touring pros that have a caddy, that often players get talked into plans that make sense on paper in terms of a yardage sport, but the player doesn't believe them.
Right.
And regularly they struggle in those shots and, swing tighter and don't hit great shots.
Right.
So, because to me, you almost need a real-time awareness in the planning phase to where you're at. It's not only the difficulty of the shot, but where you're at with your skill set. Because say it's a relatively simple shot and the player feels good, really you should be planning as aggressively as possible.
Yeah.
But if the player's not feeling that great about where the game's at, and it's quite a hard shot, you should be creating the most conservative plan you can in that situation.
Yeah.
If I've had guys that have had their C game but have planned well and have shot par or under par on some tough courses just by good planning.
Yeah. No, that's...
And I regularly see this in college golf where the guys are making 4 to 7 birdies a day and shooting over par.
Right.
And the whole goal of developing a strong mental game is to give yourself the best chance to score better.
Right. So
I find that the planning phase is really, really important in terms of getting it's got to make sense in terms of the numbers and the mental part of it, but also the player has to believe it.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have for planning? Are you referring specifically to game plan or just planning each particular shot when you get there?
There should be, especially for touring pros, they all play practice rounds, and the whole purpose of playing practice rounds is to create plans that, on every tee box, you should have a plan about how far you want to move it and where you want to play for, depending on the wind direction for that day. And then for every pin that you're likely to see, they should have some idea about, on this pin, the best look's going to be from a certain side, and then the planning for that shot is, well, how do I get it to that spot?
Yeah.
Now, if it's a trouble recovery shot, they kind of have to make it up more on the spot, but, especially for touring pros around courses that they've seen a lot of the pre-planning's already done.
Yeah.
And then it's more about, when they arrive to the ball, they start that process of collecting the information, creating a plan that fits that information and makes sense and they believe it, then connecting to that feeling, aiming and going. But every shot there should be some intention of my ball is going to start here, it's going to look like this, and it's going to finish here.
Right.
Whether you visualize that, describe that, it doesn't really matter to me, but there's got to be some intention about, I'm going to hit this ball, what do I actually want my ball to look like?
Right.
And where do I actually want it to finish? Because say, for example, it's a green light sandwich, the goal might be actually to try and hold it.
Right.
Whereas on a red light pin with a 4-iron, the goal might be to hit it 40 feet.
True.
But every shot there should be some intention of, I want my ball to start on this line, I want it to look like this in the air in terms of how it curves or doesn't curve, and this is where I want it to finish from, and because this is where I want to putt from in that situation.
Right. Okay. No, good advice. I think...
Same with putting. It's like, every putt that you're trying to make, You should have some intention of, I want it to start here, I want it to roll like this, and I want it to go in the hole at this speed, and on this part of the hole.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think planning out your strategy before you play has a huge impact on not only your end result. You mentioned somebody that could make 7 birdies and still shoot par or worse. And it's attempting to execute shots that don't make sense and don't match the skill level maybe. So I think even it can affect confidence as well when you select a shot that's more in line with what's suitable for the situation and what your comfort level is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and the thing is about your skills, no one has the same amount of skill the whole time. Sometimes you have your A game, sometimes you have your B game, sometimes you have your C game. So you got to kind of plan according to where you're at. The tricky thing about golf is sometimes you start with your A game, you start the round, but by the 7th you've got your C game.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. Sometimes you start with your C game, and by the 7th you've got your A game. So you kind of need to have that real-time awareness of where you're at.
That's true. That's real, definitely. Switching gears a little bit, we had a discussion about practice, and a term that you have is quality transferable practice. What do you recommend for players that are looking to improve their practice habits and in preparing for events?
Well, I think golf in general is one of the sports where practice is really poorly done. A lot of elite players practice under blocked conditions like beginners do. And the way I teach practice is that there's a role for technique development and a role for contact work where you're trying to hit the ball solid. Okay, so then there's a role for working on touch, and then there's a role for practicing the routine that you'd use in competition. So I always break the practice into contact work, touch work, and routine work. Okay. Now, depending on where the player's skill level is on a particular shot, this may change. Like, it gets somewhat tricky. Like, say, for example, in chipping, the guy chips well off flat lies to uphill lies, but doesn't chip well on downhill lies. So he can do maintenance contact work on uphill and normal lies, but needs more contact work on the downhill lies. So it's really manipulating the practice variables on contact, touch, and routine depending on where you're at with each part. Because say, for example, on the normal chip, his contact's good, his touch is good, then he really should be just working on full routine stuff with that. Because the skill level's there, the touch level's there, it's more practicing what you do in competition to hit good chips. Now, if the skill level's not there to hit the ball solid, the touch is going to be not there, and the player's not going to be comfortable or confident in a routine to use that in competition.
Right.
So you kind of need to look at where you're at with each part of your game and go, okay, well, what do I actually need? Do I need contact work, touch work, or full routine work? Because to me, the whole purpose of, especially for tournament players, the whole purpose of practice should be to shoot lower scores in tournaments. And the practice that you're doing should be transferable to the course. Like the whole, like hitting balls on the range, one of the things that, most players don't do is change clubs every shot. Yet you do that on the course. So a lot of it is about the practice environment in golf. It's not that close to playing golf. In the motor learning world, there's quite a bit of research on conditions of practice, and there's blocked, variable, and random practice conditions. When you're working, especially growing a skill, blocked contact works pretty well. Okay, but then part of getting the practice to transfer is then starting to change the conditions and increase the difficulty of that. Right? So, like for example, if you're hitting a 7-iron on the range and you're working on the contact, you might have some alignment aids down. You might be doing a little bit of video work. whatever it is that help you get your technique good, to hit the ball solid. Once you've repeated that several times and feel comfortable in the motion, then you might test it by starting to change targets just with the 7-iron. All right, and if you can handle that and it's still going well, then you might go to that's variable practice, and you might go to the last type of practice, which is random practice, where you then start to change the speeds of the 7-iron, change the targets of the 7-iron, and start to change comps pretty regularly.
Right. Wow, that's a good sequence.
Well, I just think that you've got to understand the role of block, variable, and random practice, and then apply that appropriately to where you're at, contact, touch, and routine. So it would be way easier for me with my clients just to say, okay, you need to practice like this. But really, I need to explain the concept to them and help them understand the conceptual basis of this, and then I can help them with practice plans based on where they're at. But they really need to understand the concept so they can do it themselves.
Right. No, that's great advice, and it's interesting. I mean, what comes to mind for me is awareness. When you mention about maybe chipping, and someone is comfortable with the uphill chip and not comfortable with the downhill chip, and maybe if someone has a poor performance chipping, they might go and practice their chipping. But if it's not understood that the bad chipping was really from a consistent set of downhill lies, that's the area that needs to be practiced to get that contact and then to move into those next phases that you mentioned. But
like the classic example in chipping would be, if the guy's typically a little bit underplaned, they're going to love uphill chipping and hate downhill chipping. Because you need the plane variation more than anything in chipping to make sure you bottom out correctly. Now, touch is dependent on consistent contact. The first step it's like putting. You've got to hit the ball solid to know regularly, to know how hard to swing to get the touch right.
Yeah.
It's understanding. If you're mentally good over the ball and consistently miss hit the ball, then you've got to address the technical things that go along with that.
Yeah. Okay. You had mentioned when we were speaking earlier about that you have 10 components and a performance bar. What were you referring to when you mentioned that?
It's actually called the performance pie.
Oh, the performance. Yes, I've seen that on your website.
Yeah,
the performance pie. Okay.
A pie-shaped thing with slices of the pie. Basically, it's a model that I developed in grad school, and it was just ways to think about that each of these components are going to contribute to your long-term development. One is mental game, 2 is physical fitness, 3 is understanding good technique and biomechanics, 4 is nutrition, 5 is rest and active recovery, 6 is support, 7 is equipment, 8 is quality practice, 9 is healthy, and 10 is happy. And I would regularly have a new client, we'll go through their performance pie where they're currently at, and most people come to me when they're struggling. So in each area, regularly if they're giving a self-grade out of 10, they're regularly 2 to 6 in those categories, with the occasional one a little bit higher or lower. But I find that over time, the players that I have that are doing well, regularly they'll be 8s, 9s, and 10s in each area. Because one of the goals and analogies that I like conceptually is that each player should have a recipe for success in each of those components. So that when you ask them, what's the best way for you to train, they'll say, my body feels best when I train like this, and my body's most functional. Or my blood sugar is most consistent when I eat these things in these order and at this timing. Or mentally I'm most focused and most confident when I do these things. So that there's less guesswork in each of those areas. And that takes a good amount of time to really develop that clearly.
Yeah. That's.
But I would say most elite players that I have talked to or worked with, after a while, they get pretty clear on if I ask them a specific question, I do this because of this.
Right.
You know, it's not. I'm not sure.
Okay. That's a nice tidy list there of components to work on, and it is important to realize there are a lot of different elements that contribute to success, and focusing on just one is certainly going to be limiting and not going to contribute as much overall as having a lot of those different factors working together. One of them.
It's part of my philosophy that it's not just mental, it's not just technical, it's not just fitness, it's a combination and collaboration of components, that help you play well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And, sometimes players kind of get caught up in all this stuff and paralysis by analysis and all those different, the mechanics of the game. How, you mentioned fun as one of the pieces there. Can you teach that to people? How do you, what do you recommend as far as enjoying the process? Is there anything that you have on that topic?
Well, at the core of my performance pie, I've got the 8 components on the outside, and then the core is healthy and happy. And obviously, if you're not healthy as an athlete, you can't do the things on the outside part of the ring, to increase your performance, right? And to me, if you're consistently unhappy doing this and working at this, then golf may not be for you.
Right.
Golf's designed to frustrate you. Golf can get you in a pretty bad place mentally, and if you're consistently there, you might want to consider, really, is this for you?
Yeah.
Because that's, to me, the starting point is if you're healthy and consistently happy about pursuing it, then you've got a good opportunity to move forward and improve.
Yeah.
But I really like the idea of the mastery process, where a lot of the attention is you're doing this not only to achieve your goals, but to really to grow your skills and try and master something to a high level. And I find that level of intrinsic motivation and focus on the mastery keeps people in golf and working on their game for long periods of time in a healthy way. I often find athletes and golfers get demotivated when they only set product goals.
Yeah.
I had a player a few years ago that his goal was, he was a first-year player on tour, and his goal was to keep his card for the year. But Hawaii, he finished 4th, and San Diego, he finished 2nd.
Okay.
So he kept his card in 2 weeks.
Right.
So we need to quickly reset the goals based on where he was at.
Of course.
And to me, look, I think goal setting should be a combination of some outcome goals that you're working towards, both at a small, medium, and big-term level, as well as some really specific mastery goals on what you're trying to grow in your skill set, mentally, physically, technically, fitness-wise.
Well, yeah, that definitely makes sense. Have that broad spectrum of goals that help to get you to where you want to go. So, any final thoughts and recommendations that you have for players that are common points of difficulty, or anything that you might be able to recommend that people could focus on and in a broad spectrum of players see improvement in that one area?
Well, I definitely think that it kind of depends on what the level of the player is and how involved they're going to be with their preparation. It's like the performance pie, to do that thoroughly, that takes a lot of time and effort. So if you're an average player who works, you're unlikely to have the time, energy, and money to do that.
Right.
But there's several improvements as the average player you can do by learning what's your preferred attentional style, understanding when to use the 2 routines, and understanding how to practice more efficiently.
Right.
So kind of depends on what level you're at.
Okay.
But I would say, look, every golfer could improve playing one shot at a time. Every golfer could detach their self-worth and self-esteem away from their outcome a lot better.
Yeah.
And every player could practice with more efficiency and quality.
That was Neale Smith, a prominent PGA Tour player, mental performance coach, sharing some of the strategies and teachings that he uses with his PGA Tour players. I'm Brett Taylor from Tour Tactics. Thanks for listening.